Welcome back, everybody. Today I wanted to go through an interesting video. So if the NFL started today, I wanted to see what an expansion draft would really look like and how teams would value age versus actual skill of players. So I went through the entire first round. I just used the draft order currently as the worst teams have the highest picks. So drop a comment in the comments below which team you think absolutely won this draft, as well as if I got your team right, please let me know. And hit that subscribe button. But let's start it off at number one. It's going to be Patrick Mahomes. This might be a little bit contrary to the norm as far as taking a little bit of an older quarterback. He is 30 years old. However, the pedigree and the overall success, especially in the playoffs, you just need a guy like that in your building. I think he's the clear 1-1, and I wouldn't be shocked if he was taken out of Josh Allen and Lamar 1-1 almost every single time. I think he's proven it on the biggest stages more than everyone else, and I think you're kind of willing to take that risk of maybe you have less years on his career, but you're going to be able to contend right away. Following Mahomes, it's going to be Josh Allen. Like I just mentioned, he stays in the division with the Jets, which would be a hilarious visual. However, I still think Josh Allen at age 29 is extremely productive. And I know he doesn't have many kind of AFC championships or Super Bowls to his name just yet, but I think if you're rebuilding a franchise, you get one of the biggest mobile threat quarterbacks that can really kind of spark plug your culture change in the organization. So no doubt Josh Allen at number two. This is where it gets a little dicey. The first two are pretty easy to me. You can definitely make the argument one or two gets flipped just due to the 1 year age gap. But Drake May at age 23, I think he is going to be the third pick. I know the playoff woes against those elite defenses is kind of causing some panic in the offseason right now. I wouldn't read too much into it, though. He was the MVP runner-up, and I thought he actually should have won the award. He was throwing to a wide receiver core of Diggs, Kayshon Boutte, and Demario Douglas. Just imagine if you can get him some real talent as well as an offensive line that can block for him. I think the sky's the limit for Drake May, and I wouldn't be kind of opposed to taking him over the proven commodities of Lamar and Burrow, knowing that I still have 5 or 6 extra years added onto his time frame. And like I mentioned before, it's going to be another second year, well, going into year 3 now. It's going to be Jaden Daniels. If you kind of did this poll before last season, he definitely would have even been in consideration for the number 1 overall pick. However, I just think his reckless play as far as being a mobile quarterback, he needs to do better at kind of taking himself into consideration when making these business decision slides. A little bit too reckless getting hit and obviously dealing with injuries this past season is definitely something that some teams would consider if they were redrafting and wanting a quarterback for the future 10, 15 years down the line. I'm not sure how his play style will kind of develop. I think he's a guy that could probably drop off after like age 30 because unless he develops to be an elite pocket passer, he kind of relies on his mobility a whole lot. So that's why I have him at 4. But then we go back to the proven commodities. It's going to be Joe Burrow. A little bit older, yes, in the 28, 29 range. But with him, it's just all about the pieces you put around him. If you just give him one good wide receiver, this offense is going to be dynamic. And as far as longevity goes, I think he could actually outlast a whole bunch of these quarterbacks, especially in the previous draft classes. I think his play style is so fluent. I think he's one of the best pocket passers. So Joe Burrow would set up the Giants well for the next decade plus. Then we've got the Browns going to Lamar Jackson, another little in-division kind of separation from quarterback to team. Man, this would be a funny visual, but going off the same point, Lamar a little bit older. However, I would still prefer Joe Burrow off of him just because I think that he doesn't rely on his mobility as much as Lamar does. I think speed is the first thing to go when it comes to aging. I don't think he would lose much of your arm strength, as you can see with Joe Flacco and Phillip Rivers coming in at starting games. So I just think that the mobile quarterbacks are a slightly lower thing. If I was the GM, I would kind of hold it against them just a little bit and prefer the kind of traditional pocket passer, especially until Lamar is able to prove it in the playoffs. That's just another differential point to prove Burrow would just kind of notch him out just a little bit. So he comes in at number 6, and then following him is going to be Caleb Williams. So now we've ironed out kind of the top of both draft classes there with the stud quarterbacks, and Caleb just falls just a little bit below. I think this group of top 7 quarterbacks is completely kind of separated from all the other tiers of quarterback. These are the elite cream of the crop type guys that will definitely set up your team for success in the next handful to decades of years. Caleb had a resurgent past season with Ben Johnson, and I think it can now be said that I don't think he needs the coordinator to kind of save him anymore. He's super successful, and I think that he has all the talent necessary to go to a franchise like Washington and completely turn them around. He is definitely a stud, so he comes in at 7. Now we've got our first non-quarterback, which would be a little bit rare since quarterback is kind of the top ticket price as far as maybe even the most important position in all of sports. However, they decide, they being the New Orleans Saints at pick number 8, they do go with Myles Garrett, the edge rusher from the Cleveland Browns, and I just think this is the right move. He is a game wrecker. He can completely solve your defensive problems from day one, no matter who you draft in the later rounds. They're going to have to send 2 to Myles Garrett or even 3. So that just gives so much focus to his side of the field, and you allowed all the other pass rushers and coverage to really just have less stress on them. I think you could turn your defense into a top 10, top 5 defense just with the addition of Myles Garrett. And I value him way more than any other defensive player in this kind of redraft. So that's why he slots in at number 8. Number 9 belongs to Jalen Hurts. Yes, I'll probably get some hate for this one. I'm not the biggest Jalen Hurts fan, but I still put him at number 9. I mean, this guy just won the Super Bowl MVP a year ago. I know it was a loaded roster. Trust me, I would love to put him lower, but at this point, I have to just give him the courtesy number 9 ranking. I think that he's developed a lot in his career, and with offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo, he just kind of regressed. So we'll learn a lot about him in 2026 to see if it was just kind of the OC or if it was more of a Jalen Hurts struggle fest. However, at pick number 9, I think it's good value for a quarterback that's still relatively young and plays kind of dual threat style of play. Going into the kind of future years, I would be fine with Jalen Hurts as long as you support him with a decent roster. And then we go to the Bengals, who go with Will Anderson, our second defensive player, the edge from the the Houston Texans. But now he goes to the Cincinnati Bengals, and I would love this fit because the Bengals haven't had any good defensive players outside of Trey Hendrickson, who's begging to get out of there. So now Will Anderson joins the team as a young and upcoming star. I think he's already kind of in that top 5 elite pass rushers. And as long as TJ Watt and Max Crosby start to phase out, this league is going to look more and more like it belongs to Will Anderson at the edge position. I think he could kind of rack up 2 to 3 Defensive Player of the Years if he continues his growth in the next few seasons. So he's able to set the identity that Cincinnati has really needed for some time now. So they get themselves a premier edge rusher in Will Anderson. And then we go to Brock Purdy, another quarterback, a little bit younger, also very underrated as far as the national media goes, just simply doesn't get enough respect. So Miami's able to get a cheap quarterback here as far as kind of the youth and being able to kind of hold him around for probably 10 plus years. I thought his kind of development as far as from a rookie to then being an MVP frontrunner, but now it's just been a consistent year in, year out, no matter who his weapons are, if it's Ricky Pearsall and Jawan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne, or if it was Prime, Debo, and Brandon Ayuk. He still had the similar production. He's able to make winning plays, and that's what I love about Brock Purdy, and that's why he finds himself at 11. And then closing off the top 12 is going to be Micah Parsons. Finds himself in a reunion with Dallas. I'm sure they wish they didn't trade him away. I'm not sure why they did, but I regress. They were able to get Micah Parsons at 12. And like I said, with Will Anderson being kind of the Defensive Player of the Year frontrunner for the next few years, it's going to be him and Micah at the top. So they're kind of the top 2 young edge rushers that are control some things, and he's able to kind of line up everywhere. He's just a game wrecker. I think him and Will Anderson would be neck and neck, but coming off the injury, a little bit skeptical, so Micah slides to number 12. And then we move on to number 13. It's going to be Justin Herbert, a guy who has the potential to be a top 5 pick in this expansion draft, but until he really proves it in the playoffs and where it matters most, I just can't pull the trigger. I think he's going to be very good with Mike McDaniel as the OC, probably leaning on the run game and getting back to more of that Jim Harbaugh identity. However, he falls to the Falcons here, who can finally get an elite quarterback for quite some time since Matt Ryan. They find their answer, and I think Justin Herbert is a good fit. I think him and Brock Purdy are in a similar situation where they're able to win games. It's all about consistency and doing it in the playoffs that they kind of have struggled with. So Justin Herbert at 13, and then the Ravens go after Penei Sewell, the offensive tackle from the Detroit Lions as of right now. I think he is one of the most athletic offensive linemen. That's why he's my highest O lineman on this board. him, Trent Williams. However, Trent is kind of towards the end of his career, so it's going to be Panay as the top offensive lineman going forward. You get some protection up front, and if you're trying to build a team and all these elite quarterbacks are gone, getting an offensive lineman is the second best thing. So you set up whichever quarterback you decide to draft in the later rounds with some actual protection. So Sewell is able to kind of fill that void for Baltimore. And then the Bucs go to our first cornerback. It's going to be Pat Surtain from the Denver Broncos. Former Defensive Player of the Year goes at pick number 15. I know it's not the flashy pick to take a corner in the top 15, but he's going to be able to control some things. Any wide receiver one coming in against Tampa is going to get shut down. So he's able to kind of captain this defense. He doesn't have the biggest impact as an edge rusher would, but the talent and the youth is just something you can't pass up on with Pat Surtain. Then we go to the Colts at 16, and they go in division. Another change here. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence switching teams. I think he has skyrocketed up my boards in the past few kind of months after actually rewatching that season and seeing everything that he really did, especially after the bye week. He was just letting it fly. There was a lot of Liam Cohen's system integrated in the early parts of the year, but down the stretch, it was all just Trevor Lawrence making timely plays. So I think he's firmly in this next tier and crop of quarterbacks. I think he still has a lot more to prove to get into that Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy type deal. But as of right now, I think he's very much on the ascend when many people wanted him out as quarterback last year. So it's good to find the guy that was once compared to Peyton Manning back on the right side, and he goes to his former team, the Indianapolis Colts. And then we go to the Detroit Lions, who get a fellow division mate, Justin Jefferson from the Vikings. Our first wide receiver taken now. Now we're getting into the auxiliary pieces of an NFL roster. Once those elite tiers of quarterback go, you just kind of need to pull the trigger on other aspects of the game. I know Justin Jefferson didn't show much with Max Brosmer and J.J. McCarthy, but if you just get him a decent quarterback or a veteran, he just expands your offense so much. It's a defense's worst nightmare having to guard him all over the field. He can single-handedly create opportunities for your run game, your wide receiver twos, your tight end, everything. He just makes the quarterback's life a lot easier. So J.J. finds himself at pick number 17. And then at 18, we've got Bo Nix, the kind of Denver Broncos quarterback that is, you would think he's a little bit younger than he is. He came into the NFL very old for a rookie. That's why he is definitely below the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels crop of quarterbacks for me. However, he showed a lot of guts in the playoffs. He kind of proved me wrong, being able to beat the Bills. I thought it was very poised, and especially in the late game kind of situations all year long. It's a reason why we all kind of wrote off the Broncos, because we didn't think they could consistently win at the end of games. But Bo Nix, just whenever they needed a 2-minute drill, he was making it happen. That's why he finds himself at 18. At 19, we've got Christian Gonzalez, another playoff star from the New England Patriots. As well as the Seahawks dominated the Patriots in the Super Bowl, Christian Gonzalez was incredible, breaking up that deep ball against Rashid Shaheed and having JSN in a bottle all game long. It's just a representation of Gonzalez and what he's been doing all throughout his kind of 2-3 year career now. So he kind of finds himself right behind Pat Surtain as the next best cornerback. You favor the youth, and I think he could be a shutdown cornerback for the next 6+ years. So you get an anchor to your defensive side of the ball for Carolina. And then following them, it's going to be the Packers going to rookie Fernando Mendoza. And at this point in the draft, there's no real surefire quarterbacks that you think are young and are going to have a decade-plus career right now. So you go to Mendoza, who you take the flyer on, and hope that he develops into a true pro quarterback. I don't think he's one of the top 3 prospects in this draft, but for a quarterback-needy draft, I think Fernando Mendoza with right coaching could actually develop into kind of a little bit better version of Jared Goff. I don't want to kind of sound like that's a bad comparison. Jared Goff did make the Super Bowl. He's been leading the Lions to 15-win season. So just knowing that if you build the team around him, they can be successful with Mendoza. Following Fernando Mendoza with the Steelers, it's going to be Jamar Chase. I love all these division switches because the Steelers have had a handful having to guard Jamar Chase over the past few seasons. However, he finds himself on the other side of this coin now with Pittsburgh, and I think they're going to be in great success. Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, Yes, they are slightly ahead of JSN for me, and I say this because I think as far as talent goes, they are just a notch above. I think the bigger, more physical wide receivers like Chase and Jefferson just have that next gear. I'm not trying to take away anything that JSN accomplished in 2025, but if I was starting a team, I would just rather put my faith and trust in Jamar and Justin Jefferson to win at the top level. So that's why he is at 21. And 22 is actually going to be Aiden Hutchinson, the defensive end from Detroit, coming off the injury. He started off a little bit slow, but I think if the Lions just had any other pass rushers, you would see how really good Aiden Hutchinson is. Teams are just able to chip and double him all game long without anyone else getting home or being a threat to the quarterback and the offensive line. So I think Aiden Hutchinson is criminally underrated, and he could definitely be in the Defensive Player of the Year talks as far as an edge rusher goes in the next few years. So you get good value here at 22, just knowing that the injury concerns are definitely on the forefront of a lot of teams' minds right now. But you get the youth in Aiden Hutchinson. And then we're going to go to Jordan Love, the next crop of quarterback. You might make the argument that he's a little bit too low. I wouldn't oppose to that, but at this point, I'm just not sure if Jordan Love has that top tier kind of quarterback in him. He's very fluky in the games where he'll have 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, and the next one just only throw for 150. It's very inconsistent, and I don't know how much of that is coaching or the weapons around him, but he consistently is making the wild card and having pretty good playoff performances, but you're yet to see kind of that 13-14 win season that puts him in the first round bye or just making the Packers a real Super Bowl threat. So hopefully he's able to develop into that, but the Eagles are able to get their quarterback, which I think is good value here at pick number 23. Following Love at 24, it's going to be JSN. I mentioned him earlier as a tier below Jamar and Justin Jefferson, but he finds himself still in the top 24, and that's just because he is an absolute game wrecker. His route tree is everywhere. He kind of operates in the slot. You can also play him at the X and just kind of run him deep. And he is a cornerback's worst nightmare, so being able to get whichever quarterback you get, kind of an elite wide receiver target, I think is great value at this point with kind of limited elite edge rushers and young quarterbacks. I think this makes a lot of sense for Jacksonville at 24. And then we go to the 25th pick. It's going to be Jared Verse, the defensive end from the Chicago Bears. He is kind of that next tier of edge rushers where you don't know if he's truly has the capability to be a defensive player of the year in future years. You're betting on the talent in the youth, yes. However, the sack numbers just haven't been there in the past 2 seasons. I'm expecting him to really break out in 2026 with new defensive additions to kind of allow him to be more free and operate in one-on-one situations. But he's definitely a tier below the other options in Micah Parsons and Aiden Hutchinson. So at 25, the Bears get a much-needed edge rusher in Jared Verse. Then we go to Buffalo, and they are actually going to go with Puka Nacua, the next wide receiver, and I know he might be more talented than everyone else, but the recent comments that he doesn't want to play until he's after 30, I think would drive an NFL GM crazy if you're trying to draft him in the first round of a redraft or an expansion draft, because you would not be drafting him for 4 years of production. You want a guy that's at least 6 years in your offense and in your team's kind of production on the offensive side of the ball. But the Bills take the flyer at 26 and hope that they can convince Puka to stay around much longer, because when in the operating Matt Stafford system, he is at the top of the game. And who knows, maybe in later rounds they can snag Stafford and just kind of go 1 year and hope to run it on the table with Puka and Stafford connection. So Puka at 26, and then the Niners go with Bryce Young. Yes, many people probably won't think he deserves to be on this list. However, you're betting on the upside in the progression of kind of Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud has been polar opposite. Stroud has seemingly declined since his rookie year, and Bryce Young is on the ascend, finally leading his team to the playoffs. So you hope that if they get more weapons outside of Tetero McMillan, Bryce Young can fully develop into a star quarterback. So you're willing to take this shot in the first round of the redraft, knowing that he is young and hopeful. And if he's not, then you'll have to pull the plug, but it's worth giving it a shot for a guy that's consistently gotten better every single year in this offense. So Bryce Young at 27, and then 28 belongs to Tristan Wirfs, another offensive lineman, this time coming from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's one of the most versatile offensive linemen. You can kind of switch where he plays inside or at the tackle position, so I think that's great flexibility for a team in the first round of a redraft, being able to kind of rearrange your offensive line and kind of get that all solved in one pick in the first round is a great kind of frees you up in future rounds to take a guard or a tackle and kind of make things work. So Tristan Wirfs at 28, and then 29 is going to be Cam Ward, a guy that I personally am very still bullish on. I know the wins didn't total up in 2025, but I think with Brian Daboll and Robert Saleh as new coaches in Tennessee, you're going to see that Cam Ward actually did show a lot of flashes this past season. I think he's going to put it all on display in 2026, and that he could actually sneaky put this team in the wild card race in Tennessee for the first time in a while. So I think Cam Ward is well worth the draft capital. You can make the argument he should be ahead of Mendoza, but at this point, at 29, I think it is the perfect spot for the Rams to take Cam Ward. And then the Broncos will follow it up with TJ Watt, the edge rusher from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the main concern is just the age at this point. If it was just a one-year stint, he would be in the top 15, top 12 picks of this draft. However, with the age concerns, you want to make sure that you're maximizing the future of your team. So TJ Watt falls all the way to 30. But if the Broncos were able to draft some more win-now guys, they may have a real chance at the Super Bowl in this kind of mock draft, redraft situation. So that's why TJ Watt is able to slip this far, but no kind of consequence to his game. It is just all about the age and kind of strategy to these redrafts. And then into the 31, it's going to be Max Crosby seen here. He is the edge rusher from the Las Vegas Raiders, going to the Patriots where he can pair with Mike Vrabel, the coach that he loves and always speaks so highly of and wanting to play for. I think Max is worthy of a first-round pick. I know the age concerns, but the just production and the overall culture leader that he is, I think if you're just bringing in a stray group of guys to be an NFL team from one day on, you could allow Max Crosby to be a real leader amongst these guys and actually kind of get them cohesive as one unit. And I think that is the intangible parts of drafting a first-round guy on Max Crosby, is just kind of everything else he does besides his play. I think he is a for sure first-rounder, and that's why he slots in at 31. And then our Super Bowl champs at 32 are going to go with Jalen Carter, the defensive tackle from the Philadelphia Eagles. And as far as other talent, the elite positions have already seen their first tier of athletes gone. So they go to the defensive tackle position and get the best one in the game, who is also very young and still on the up and up. So Jalen Carter is a game wrecker. He can solve your rush defense right away and overall draw doubles. He can get to the quarterback. He is everywhere on the Eagles' kind of defensive line. I think this would stir up a lot of issues from day one, trying to build a defense for Mike McDonald. So Jalen Carter caps off the end of our first round of the NFL redraft if it were to get started today. So drop a comment in the comments below if I got your team or who you think should be higher. I'll be scrolling through, responding to everyone. But yes, before you go, please hit that subscribe button. I would really appreciate it. And that is going to do it. Peace.